We got up to the Mishnah on Daf Chavtes Amud Aleph. So we're going to try to learn this Mishnah, which is more about Yibum and Chalitza in a case where two sisters fell for Yibum, and you cannot be miyabim both sisters because of the Iser of Achos Kukas. So Shlosha Achim, we have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and Shnayim Mehem, that means let's say Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters, L'shtei Achios, the Echad Mufne, whereas Levi is not married at all. He's Panui. Okay, then, so Levi is not married at all. So let's say, for example, Reuven is married to Rachel, Shimon is married to Levi. Shimon is married to Leah, I meant to say, and Levi is free. He's not married to anyone, and then Reuven and Shimon die. Rachel and Leah, two sisters, fall to Levi. In the first case, what happens is that let's say Rachel, the wife of Reuven, falls for even with Reuven's death to Levi. The Asaba Mufne, this guy Levi, who's not married, Asaba Maimer. Maimer means kesef or shtar, correct? Which on a deraisa level is not chal, but midrabanan we recognize it as marriage. Now Shimon dies, and his almana, we call her Leah, falls for Yibum to Levi. Okay, so now at this point, since he didn't do Yibum or Chalitza to Rachel with the death of Reuven, so he's got now two sisters that both have a Zikas Yibum and Omdos Lefan of Liyabim. Now he cannot be Miyabim both of them. Correct? He can't be Miyabim both Rachel and Leah, obviously, because then he would be married to two sisters. That would be an Erev of Achos Ishta. Okay. So now, right, Rachel fell from Levi and Levi did a mime. Then Shimon died and Leah fell in front of Levi. Is Beit Shammai Omrim, Ishto vehalazo teitze mishum achos isha. That Rachel, who received Maimar from Levi, is Ishto Imo. If I understand correctly, the word Imo here means that she remains his wife and he doesn't have to divorce her. Presumably because at the time that he gave her Maimar, she was how should I say, muteris, right? There was no Iser because there was no Zika to Leah. There was only at that moment a Zika to Rachel. However, halazu hates it. Lazu means Leah, right? Because as far as Rachel is concerned, it says Ishto Imo. And it's a valid kinyan. We're not going to ask him to break up that marriage with a get. But as far as Leah is concerned, teitze. Now, what does that mean? Teitze. Teitze means with what? With chalitza. It doesn't mention any word about chalitza, correct? And it sounds like Leah is allowed to get married to anyone even without chalitza. What would be the sense for that? And the answer is because the moment that Leah fell for Yibum, she didn't really fall for Yibum at all, because since Beit Shammai recognized the marriage between Levi and Rachel, then Leah is Levi's wife's sister. And that's called an Erev Achos Isha. And Achos Isha doesn't require neither Yibum nor Chalitza because she's one of the 15 arayos mentioned in the Mishnah at the beginning of Masechet Yevamot. So it's like there are two dinim here that are hava hatalia. One din generates the second din. The first din is that we recognize the marriage through Maimar between Levi and Rachel. And the second din, which is a spin-off of the first, is that therefore, when Shimon subsequently dies and Leah falls to Levi, she doesn't need neither Chalitza and certainly not Yibum because of the Erev of Achos Ishto. So far, so good. And the real strange thing here in Beit Shammai is that we recognize Maimar as a full-fledged kinyan to the extent to which we don't, the Zika is completely gone. It's like history. It's like evaporates. The Zika has evaporated. Why? Because if not for the fact that we recognize the Maimar, as Beit Shammai do, then both Rachel and Leah fall for Yibum simultaneously to Levi. I mean, again, as a matter of history, Rachel fell first, but it's irrelevant because there was neither Yibum nor Chalitza to Rachel, so her Zika is still active, it's still alive and well, and therefore, when Shimon later dies and Leah falls for Yibum to Levi, we now have two sisters, both of who are Zkukos L'Yibum. And therefore, we should have an erva not only with regard to Leah, but also an erva regard to Rachel. And how can we maintain that marriage? Ubeis Hill Omrim, Motzias Ishto beget. Even though Levi had implemented a Maimar with Rachel, he now has to divorce her. He has to remove whatever kinyan, we'll call it a rabbinic kinyan, a kinyan d'Rabbanan that Maimar had generated. He's got to remove that, uproot that with a get. On top of that, we go back to the Doraisa halacha that Rachel fell for Yibum and therefore she needs Chalitza in order to marry someone else. So it's not enough that Rachel gets a get from Levi. She needs Chalitza from Levi as well in order to marry someone else. So if they ever wake you up in the middle of the night and they ask which married woman needs both a get and Chalitza, you'll quote this Mishnah of Beis Hillel. Yeshes Achiv. And now let's take a look at the status of Leah, right? Leah now is Eshes Achiv, the Chalitza. Now let's just think about this. Why does Leah need Chalitza? Leah needs Chalitza. If I understand correctly, the reason why Leah will need Chalitza is because since the Rabbanon recognize the Maimar, so on the level of the Rabbanon, I had it. Let's read on and see, maybe it'll make sense as we go along. Zohi sha'amru oilo al ishto oilo al eshes ach. In other words, he's stuck without any wife whatsoever. He can't marry Rachel because they still insist that he divorce Rachel and then give a chalitza as well. He can't marry Leah because Leah is Eshes Achim and there's no heter yivu. But the only question is, why does she require chalitza? Do you have any note on that, maybe? Because here he doesn't give you a clue as to why Leah requires chalitza. No, the get is going to Rachel. I'm asking why Leah needs chalitza. Is it okay? Maybe I cut you off in the middle. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I'm not talking about get. I want to know why Leah needs chalitza.
Because she's a kuka.
Why she's a kuka? I don't get it. She's an erva of Eshes of Achos Ishta. On a Deraisa level, we're not going to recognize the Maimon, I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. We're playing the game on both sides. On the one hand, Rachel needs a get because we're recognizing the Maimon. But on the other hand, on the Deraisa level, the Torah doesn't recognize the Maimon. And if the Torah doesn't recognize the Maimon, then Leah needs Chalitza. But why? Here's my question: why doesn't the Chalitza of Rachel, why isn't that sufficient for Leah? Because they're two different brothers. In other words, one Chalitza is good for a Tzara. Let's say you have two Tzaras that were married to the same one. But here there are two Zikos, or there are two generators of Zikos, if you follow me. Reuven generates Zika with his death, as far as Rachel, and Shimon generates Zika vis-a-vis Leah as far after his death. So the Chalitza to Rachel could not in any way supplant the need for a Chalitza to Leah. Leah is Achos Ishto. No, she's not Achos Ishto because the Torah doesn't recognize the marriage. We require get only on a D'Rabbanan. Even after he gives a get, he still has to give a Chalitza to Leah.
That's what.
No, I'm pointing out that even before he gives the get, when there's a relationship between Rachel and Levi, it's only a relationship to Rabbanan. On a Deraisa level, it's just a Zikas Yimum. And even though both Zikos make each one of the two sisters into Achos Siku Kasam, that itself is only the Rabbanan. Again, Mimanashach, as we go back to the Deraisa level, both Rachel and Leah will need Chalitz. That's pretty good. So now the Gemara is going to analyze this lashon of Zohi, right? It says at the end of the Mishnah in the name of Beis Hillel, Zohi, right? Oilo al ishto, oilo al eches ach. Now there seems to be a methodological rule, I call it a literary rule in learning the Mishnah, that whenever it says Zo, as opposed to Zaklal, it's always going to be a mute. So when it says Zaklal, it's a reboot. But if it says just Zu or Zeh, that's a mute. And therefore the Gemara wants to know Zohi lemute mai. By the way, it's interesting that in Hebrew, he classifies or describes the word oi as a kina, which I think in English is called a lamentation. So there's going to be another case, lemute mai, which doesn't deserve this lamentation, this kina. Lemute hach de Rabbi Yoshua. Okay, so this is sugya way later on in the Masechet Yevamot. And the Masifta here gives you a whole long introduction to Rabbi Yeshua. And what's going to happen in the case of Rabbi Yeshua is that once again, a person is going to give up on two wives. He's going to be mafsid both nashim, like in our Mishnah. But then we're going to compare Rabbi Yeshua to our Mishnah, but then contrast Rabbi Yeshua with our Mishnah. So here's the case. Reuven and Shimon get married to Rachel and Leah. Two brothers married two sisters. Okay? So I have a mechutin whose son is married to my daughter. He lives in Australia. He and his brother married two sisters. And here in Miskabla Dach, there's a doctor, I'm trying to remember his name. I haven't seen him in a while. It's good. Anyway, he and his two brothers married three sisters. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? He's the gastroenterologist. Paz, right. Paz and his two brothers married three sisters. So it's interesting how these things happen. Okay. So he says the following. Reuven marries Rachel, she's the older sister. And Shimon marries Leah, the younger sister. Now, this is very important. When Shimon marries Leah, She is what's called Kiddushay Miyun. She's very young, and she was married off by either her mother or her brothers, or one of her brothers. Kigon Shavia Hisia Lifnei Chen Lodem Acher V'Niskarshim Mimenu She. Oh, he has another case here. I don't know why it has to be so complicated, where even the father is alive. So the father's alive, and he gets a one-shot opportunity to marry off his daughter who's a katana. What do I mean by one shot? In an event, now that marriage is dorais, but in an event that she gets a get from her husband, then she doesn't return back to her father's rishus. He can't marry her off a second time on a dorais. If he marries her off on the second round, it's only derabban. Again, I'm not sure why the Masechet has to give that complicated case. It could have been just a girl who's orphaned from her father. Okay. So again, Reuven's married to Rachel Dorais, full-fledged Kiddush. And Shimon is married to Leah Midrabanan. It's a rabbinic marriage. Mace Reuven, Benafla Rachel if they Shimon Liyibum. Now Shimon is in a very strange situation. On a Doraisa level, he's Chayiv in Yibum, or at least Chalitza. But on a Darabanan level, he is married to the Yevamot's sister, only Midrabanan. That's Leah. So he's married to Leah Midrabanan. So he cannot be Miyabim Rachel because she is the sister of his wife Leah on a Darabanan level. Now, you might ask the following question. Why does Rachel fall for Yibum at all if her sister Leah is married to the Yavam? But the answer is that's only a marriage that's D'Rabbanan. So on a Doraisa level, Shimon is not married to Leah. Right? Like we said before, the father can't marry her off twice. So therefore, Rachel needs Chalitza. So she's in a situation where she doesn't have the option of Yibum, because Midrabanan, she is the wife of the sister of his wife. On the other hand, on a Doraisa level, she needs Yibum, because he's not married to her sister, meaning Shimon is not married to Leah on a Doraisa level. Okay. So comes along Reb Shimon, and he says the following. Comes along Reb Yeshua, and he says the following. Shimon has to divorce Leah. Okay, we'll try to figure out why. And then he has to also give Chalitza to Rachel. Let's think for a second. Why is it that we force Shimon to divorce Leah? I understand why she needs a divorce, because Midrabanan, she's married to him. But why? Why? Oh, so just 1 second. I want to answer one earlier question that we asked, and then we'll try to get back to our question here, why we have to force the divorce. But as far as why she needs to get is concerned, I'm sorry. I asked the question before, why are we talking about a case where the father had married off his daughter as a katana once, she got divorced, and now he's marrying her off a second time? Oh. The reason why we have to introduce that is because if she's orphaned from her father, then she doesn't need to get it. Right? That's called Kiddushay Miyun. She just walks out of the marriage. But here we're talking about a case where a Yeshua requires a get. So it means that with Rabbanon, she's married. So we have three categories. We have a Ishus Doraisa on one polar extreme. On the other polar extreme, we have Kiddushay Miyun, which is not even married. She doesn't require even a get, even on Rabbanon level. And then in the middle, between the two polar extremes, we have Kiddushay Rabbanon. That requires a get. Now let's get back to our second question. And that is, why is it that Shimon has to divorce his wife Leah. So let's just figure this out. Right, both Rachel and Leah fell for Yibum. Therefore, Leah is Achos Zikukasa.
I think the point is that, Rabbi Yeshua says he has condition, but we don't pass him.
Oh, but even if you don't pass them that way, which I want to try to figure out, what is the logic?
But the point of the Gemara is that we don't pass them that way, and that but the Gemara there says just like it says here, and we're gonna be mamayik that.
Right.
That's the thing that's not.
But yeah, you're a step ahead of me. You're 100% right. But I just want to figure out in my mind, why does Rabbi Yeshua insist that Shimon divorced his wife Leah? And I think it has to do with the host. Does that make sense? Achos Kukasa, meaning since Rachel and Leah both fell for Yibum. Now that's not going to do it. That can't be enough, because okay, they both fell for Yibum, but he can give chalitza to Rachel, and he can continue his marriage with Leah. But Leah, second, I'm just missing one piece here. Okay. I understand Rachel, the Rabban is considered Achos Ish. She requires Chalitz. Because of the Rabban, there's no Yibum. But now, why does Yeshua require that you divorce, that Leah get divorced Shimon? Yeah. Why does Rabbi Yeshua require that Shimon divorced Leah? Shimon divorced. Oh, so that I think is another. I don't know if we learned this sugya, but it keeps coming up. Although the sugya itself, I don't think we learned. There's something called achos chalutzos, and that's a separate isa. And Leah's status is achos chalutzos. He has to give chalitza to Rachel because midrabanan we recognize his marriage to Leah, which makes Rachel into achos ishto on a drabanan level. So she doesn't have an option of yibum, she needs chalitza. But once she gets chalitza, then Shimon can no longer remain married to Leah because Leah's achos chalutzos. Okay. I mean, again, I don't know if we ever got a chance. We were learning Yevamot now for about a year already, and it's beginning to forget things, but we've discussed in the past achos chalutzos, but I don't know if we ever got a chance to take that sugya on head on. It's there's another 100 pages to this Masechet, so somewhere in that 100 pages there's a sugya called achos chalutzos. So that's what I think is going on. So now it comes out according to Rabbi Yeshua, as Mitch was saying before, that he's got to get rid of both of these, meaning he can't be married neither to Rachel nor to Leah, and we should apply that kina of oilo, etc. However, the zoo in our Mishnah is coming to exclude Rabbi Yeshua. The law of Dinin Kavos. We don't accept it. Ella, but we have two other options. Ika Rabbi Gamliel, Ika Rabbi Eliezer. So let's go through now these two shitos of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. First, we have Rabbi Gamliel. He writes here the following: Over Rabbi Gamliel in Miano Leah Haktana Bebaila. Oh, 1 second. Now he's saying that he's what I said before is wrong. I said before the only way you could terminate the marriage between Leah and Shimon is through a get. It seems that that's not so, but rather it's Kedushay Mir. Okay? So therefore, Yochel Shimon Hayavam Liyavim es Rachel Agdola. If Leah is Mema'enes, Shamir Mafkias Nesui Leila Mafreya. Right? I think we've had this also in the past, that Mir removes the Ishus Lamafreya. So therefore, Rachel can fall for Yibum. Oh, now what happens if Leah is not Mema'enes? Then Yamtin Shimon Hayavam Ad Shetigdal Leah Ishto V'tia Knuya Lo Menator Bebe'ilu. So now, what the other option is that Shimon can hold off Yibum with Rachel, or Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel, and he can decide that he wants to remain married to Leah. Which again, we were working very hard to understand why Rabbi Yeshua didn't have that option, rejected that option. But anyway, Rabbi Gamliel, it seems very comfortable for us. You know, we're comfortable with Rabbi Gamliel because he's saying there's no reason to upset the marriage between Shimon and Leah. So let Shimon and Leah remain married. But at this point, their marriage is only D'Rabbanan, and therefore we wait until Leah becomes, let's say, 12 years old. At that point, with intimacy, he has Kiddushay Bia, and now she becomes his wife on a Doraisa level. What do we gain now? At this point in time, Rachel becomes Achos Ishto Doraisa, which is one of the 15 Arayas. And therefore, she doesn't require even Chalitza. She doesn't need Yibum or Chalitza. Wow, it's like from one extreme to the other when you compare Rabbi Yeshua to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Yeshua wants to terminate both marriages, and Levi doesn't have an option of being miyabim Rachel because she's on a D'Rabbanan level achos ishto. On the other hand, giving chalitza to Rachel means that now Leah becomes achos chalutzaso, and therefore Leah has to be divorced. And therefore we end up, according to Rabbi Yeshua, with a situation in which Levi cannot be married neither to Rachel nor to Leah. And now we go to the other extreme, to Rabbi Gamliel, and Rabbi Gamliel maintains that what's wrong with the marriage between Shimon and Leah? Let's allow that marriage to develop and flourish until it becomes Kedushay Torah. At that point, Levi's relationship to Rachel is that of Achos Ishto, and therefore Leah becomes his full-fledged wife through Be'ilah. And Rachel, now becoming a Achos Ishto, goes free without Yibum, which is really strange because before that birthday party of Leah, the 12th birthday party, Rachel needed either Yibum and Chalitza. So how does that work? I don't understand. Are you with me on this question? Rachel fell for Yibum to Shimon, right, with the death of Reuven. Now Shimon effectuates a marriage d'oraisa to Leah, and Rachel doesn't require chalitza. Second, I understand that there's no possibility of Yibum, but L'chorah she requires. This Gemara is on Daf Kuf Tes. I don't even have Daf Kuf Tes. Do any of you gentlemen have Daf Kuf Tes? No. We should have one on the other side of this wall. If anybody is in the mood to get it, it will be Yevamos, probably volume 3. That's my guess. Just to see Rav Gamliel in the original. He says here, Yovam Mamtin Biliyabim Esagdolo such a Tigdal Akatan. Ulam Eno Osur Beishta Kanach. All right, I don't know why that is. Tosus, on the other hand, holds that Hayovam Osur Livol Es Hakana Ad Shetigdol. She says, Machlokas Rashi and Tosus. What's the status and Isra had to be as far as Leah and Shimon up until the moment of her 12th birthday? Shekolshu Eno Poter Esagdol Bia. You saw Rav Gamliel, or you gave it just now? Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah. Is Rav Gamliel here? First, let's find Rav Yeshua. Okay. Rav Yeshua Omer Oilo al Ishto Oilo al Eshes Achiv Motzias Ishto beget the Eshes Achiv Bechalitza. Okay. He has a note 35. Let's see if he addresses that question. You know what? He has a long footnote here on Rabbi Yeshua, but I think we'll leave that for a moment and go back to Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. I'll read to you Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel says in Miana. So that means that now, if Leah is Mema'enes, then Shimon can now be Miyabim Rachel, because Yibum works Lamafrei. Good? V'im Lav, right? She doesn't want to be Mema'enes. She's very happy and comfortable with the marriage to Shimon. Is Tamtin Ad Shetagdil V'teitze Halazu Mishum Achos Ish. All right, so on this he has 2 footnotes. Okay. Rabbi Gamliel permits the Yavam to stay married to his minor wife until she reaches adulthood, when a marriage will become valid biblically. At that time, her older sister becomes an erva of Achos Ishto under biblical law, therefore it's exempt from both Chalitza and Yibum. And since she is discharged without Chalitza, therefore, the sister, meaning Leah, is not Achos Chalutzasa, so she can remain married to the Yavam. The Yavam may not simply perform Chalitza to the older sister, meaning Rachel, immediately, because this would render his wife a Achos Chalutzasa. Okay, so that's this Achos Chalutzasa business. Let's see if he says anything here about Achos Chalutzasa once we're on the town. Just 1 second. Right. So again, achos chalitza is very similar to achos ishta. Okay, fine. So that's Rabbi Gamliel. Oh, now he adds the following note. Rabbi Gamliel obviously holds that Yevamah's zika, attachment to the Yavam, is not analogous to marriage. Right? That's called ein zika. So Rabbi Gamliel is holding ein zika. That's what he says here. And therefore does not render her sister forbidden to him. For if he held yesh zika, then the oldest sister Zika would render his wife, meaning Leah, achos kukasa, even before she reached adulthood. So basically, I think what he's saying here is that if you hold yesh zika, there's no way of justifying the continued marriage relationship between Shimon and Leah because Leah is achos kukasa. The answer has to be that Rabbi Gamliel holds ein zika. Now, he quotes this opinion that we mentioned earlier, that the Yavam may not cohabit with his minor wife while he is waiting for her to reach adulthood, although Rabbi Gamliel maintains that the Yavama's zika attachment to the Yavam does not forbid cohabitation with his sister, still it is unseemly, mechur adavar, to cohabit with her before the Yavama has been discharged, as explained by Talmud. So let's see, do we understand now Rav Gamliel? Let's just go over it. According to Rav Gamliel, ein zika. So if ein zika, then there's no iser of achos zekukaso between Shimon and Leah. Now, does Rachel require chalitza? And the answer is, it all depends. If Leah opts to be mema'enes, which is oker lemafreya, then Rachel needs chalitza, or even could have yibum, correct? If, on the other hand, Leah decides not to be mema'enes, then Rabbi Gamliel says we encourage the Yavam, meaning Shimon, to wait until Leah becomes a Gedola. At that point, when he has Be'ilu with her, he will consummate a marriage to Oraisa with Leah. Till now, it was only to Rabbanan. And as a result, Rachel doesn't need what? Doesn't need Chalitza. And we explained that Rabbi Gamliel holds ein zika. Okay. Now we get to Rabbi Eliezer. So again, since I have the Gemara open in front of me, we'll read Rabbi Eliezer in the original. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Melamdin is haktana shetemoin bo. In other words, if we want to be matir yibum to Rachel, then we're going to encourage Leah to be mema'enes. And that's all Rabbi Eliezer said. This says he has a footnote here, number 30. When a minor wife refuses her husband, their marriage is annulled retroactively, which means that she was never really his wife. Therefore, by instructing the minor sister, called a Leah, right, to refuse her husband, Shimon, right, we make it permissible for him to perform yibum with Rachel. For after the minor sister's refusal meaning miyun, it emerges in retrospect that she was never the Yavam's wife, meaning Shimon's wife, which means that her adult sister, that's Rachel, was not his wife's sister, because there was never a marriage relationship between Shimon and Leah as a result of Leah's miyun. Accordingly, the Yava may perform yibum. No, he could be miyabim Rachel. Wait a minute. So what's the machlokas here between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel? They sound awfully similar. Oh, he says, unlike Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Gamliel maintains that we do not instruct Leah to refuse her husband because there is a permissible way for her to remain married. Oh, see, it's a strange kind of thing. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer seems to be encouraging Yibum. Second. He could have encouraged, that doesn't make sense because he could have encouraged Yibum by waiting. Yeah. In other words, the marriage between Rabbi Gamliel and Leah is not Yibum. No way, no how. Right? Leah was not married to his brother or anything like that. Rachel was married to his brother. So Rabbi Eliezer's perspective is that our ultimate goal, the end zone, what is it, 7 points you get for if you carry it to the end zone? 6? 6 points. Was the 7 is for a foot thing. What's that called? Yeah, but for kicking the stick. What? Oh, that's a field. Oh, so there's no such thing as 7.
And not one at one time.
Okay. All right. So what's the end zone? That's what I think is going on. The goal of Rabbi Elazar and the goal of Rabbi Gamliel are two different goals. Rabbi Eliezer, his agenda is let's get Yibum going. And we certainly have that option. Rabbi Gamliel doesn't deny that. He doesn't deny the option of simply recommending, encouraging, cajoling, whatever word is appropriate here, Leah, to be Ma'anis. On the other hand, Rabbi Gamliel is waving a different flag. His goal is, hey, wait a minute. Shimon is married to Leah. Why do you want to break up that marriage? It's a very romantic relationship. Why break up this marriage? So he says, you know what? We don't put Yibum of Rachel on the top of our agenda. Let's put maintaining the marriage on top of the agenda, and don't worry about Rachel. Rachel doesn't even need chalitza. Why? Because we're going to wait until Leah becomes a gedola. That marriage now is going to mature from a Rabbanan to a Doraisa. Rachel now becomes Eishes Achir, and she doesn't need Yibum or chalitza. That's what I got out of this. So I have to thank Artscroll here, because I do have Masechet, but I don't know where. It's volume 5. Here. So I put this red thing here in case we'll need more. But you see, Jeff, that little extra effort that you made to get to tomorrow saved my shift today. Because I wouldn't know what's flying. Okay. And now the Gemara says, Ike Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, I'll read to you the Masechet. Shomer sheyesh l'lamed es Leah ktanish etemoim b'bayv le'afkiu and esuin, which means l'mafreya. V'yochal hayovav, now Shimon could be miyabim Rachel. Nimtza shel divrei shneim ein hayovav mafsid el ishach. Like whichever one. Either if you go with Rabbi Gamliel, he's not going to be married to Rachel. If you go with Rabbi Eliezer, he's not going to be married to Leah. But either way, he gets away with one wife. Whereas according to Rabbi Yeshua, there's no possibility of being married to either one of them. So I just want to go back to Rabbi Yeshua one more time as a clincher to make sure that we know what Rabbi Yeshua said. So Rabbi Yeshua says the following: we're going to require Shimon to be Megarish Leah, and we're going to require Shimon to give chalitza to Rachel. Okay. Ooh, you know what? Let me just borrow this again. Maybe he'll tell us why Rabbi Yeshua rejects both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel. And that I think would clinch this whole suit. Then we have. Let's see. Oh, that was a footnote. Remember, I mentioned to you number 35. We'll have to get back to it. Okay, so I forgot about it. Rabbi Yeshua rejects both approaches to the dilemma. He calls it the Yavam's dilemma, meaning Shimon's dilemma. He is opposed to instructing the Yavam's wife to perform miyun. Okay, this we don't know why. What's the chisaron of Rabbi Eliezer encouraging miyun? So he tells you that for that, you have to learn another sugya later on. So again, we don't know why he is so inhibited about encouraging Miyun. He also rejects Rabbi Gamliel's approach of waiting until the minor wife reaches adulthood, at which time she may remain remarried to the Yovam, because this approach is based on Rabbi Gamliel's view that Ein Zika. Rabbi Yeshua maintains, on the other hand, that Yesh Zika. And he says Zika is analogous to marriage. So let's just figure this out. Since Yesh Zika is therefore, we have to demand that Shimon divorce Leah. Just let me get that straight. Right? Al Shimon Legarish es Leah Ishto. Why? Because Yesh Zika. Oh, so if Yesh Zika, then Leah is the sister of his Kuka. We get back to Achos Kukaso. The Lachlots LeRachel. Why? Because once he gives a divorce to Leah, Rachel becomes a Chos Girushas. All right, the article doesn't mention this concept called a Chos Girushasa. Again, we're going to encourage, and let's go further. We're going to demand a get because of Yesh Zika, which means that what? That Leah is a Chos Kukaso. And at the same time, once Shimon delivers a get to Leah, Rachel becomes a Chos Grushas. Again, I'm assuming that a Chos Grushaso is also like a kind of a Chos Ishto. It's, you know what I mean, like a subcategory of a Chos Ishto, probably on a Drabanan level. Now, once Rachel becomes a Chos Grushaso, then the option of Yibum is now closed. Even if he would choose to give Chalitza and Rachel first, which would seemingly break up the status of Achos Kukaso vis-a-vis Leah, Olav Legarishes Leah, Mishum Shi Achos Chalutzos. Okay, so that's the other concept that he mentioned it here, called Achos Chalutzos. Nimta Shel Rabbi Yeshua, Ayava Mafsid Shtei Noshim, and therefore we get the Oy and Oylo on both ends. So that's where we got up to so far. Okay, that's good. Now let's see what time it is. Let's see. Now let's get back to Beit Shammai at this point, right? Beit Shammai says, in the case where he gave Maimar, let's just go over this one more time. Right, there were three brothers. Two are married to two sisters. The first brother, the older brother, dies. Let's say leaves the older sister for Yibo. And Levi went ahead and he gave Maimar. He gave Maimar to Rachel. Correct? Eshes Reuven. Now Shimon dies. And Leah falls for Yibum to Levi. Comes over Beit Shammai, he says that he remains married to Rachel through Maimar, and Leah doesn't need neither Chalitza nor Yibum. That's the way we understood it. So Omer Rabbi Lazar lo tema Maimar lebeit Shammai kona kinyan gamur. It would seem, at the face of it, that Beit Shammai recognizes Maimar in the case of Yevamot as a full-fledged Eshes Ish. And therefore he's allowed to maintain that relationship even after Shimon dies and Leah falls for Yibum to Levi. But he's married to Rachel. The Iboy Lafuke Sagi Lo Begita. Meaning, if Levi wants to terminate his relationship, his Ish's relationship with Rachel, then all he needs is get. Sagila begita. Now she can marry anyone she wants. And basically, according to Beit Shammai in the Havamina here, which the Gemara is rejecting, Lo Tema, right? Beit Shammai identifies Maimer as Yibum. You follow my point? Maimer equals Yibum. Again, Maimer means Kesef Vashtar, but it's just as good as Yibum. And therefore what? If it's Yibum, then once Yibum takes place, all you need is get. There's no need for Chalitza. And Rabbi Elazar now rejects that understanding of Beit Shammai. Again, there was such a Havamina. Ella, but rather, Maimar le Beit Shammai Eino Kone, which means that his wife Rachel still needs chalitza if there's no full-fledged issue. El litchos b'tzara bilvad. What does this mean? Ella. Again, it comes out that like this, Rachel needs two things, correct? She needs get and chalitza. Get for the maimar and chalitza for the zikas yib. Ella litchos b'tzara bilvad. What do those words mean? Litchos b'tzara bilvad. Right. The problem here is that in addition to Rachel, now Shimon dies and Leah falls for Yibum to Levi. So obviously Levi can't be miyavim both of them because they are sisters. But halazu teitze mishum achos isha. Since so we're recognizing the mimer to such an extent that Leah doesn't have a zikas yibum at all. That's called lidchos b'tzara bilvad. Just a second. Lo ta'akiv al balas ha'maimer l'siyamin. So if I understand correctly, the Maimar, according to Beit Shammai, accomplishes a great goal. It's not a full-fledged yibum, but it sort of protects her, that's Rachel, from becoming an achos kukaso of Leah. Meaning, if we wouldn't recognize Maimar at all, then there's no possibility of allowing Levi to remain married to Rachel, because with the death of Shimon and Leah falls for Yibum to Levi, Rachel becomes a chos kukas. But here's where Beit Shammai recognized the effectiveness of Maimar, such that now Levi could be miyavim Rachel, and she, Rachel, is, so to speak, protected, right? She's like has an invincible shield, protected against the achos kukaso status, which should have emerged with the death of Shimon when Leah fell for Yibum to Levi. And therefore, the thrust of what Beit Shammai wants to say is lo ta'akev. The status of Leah should not be ma'akiv balas hamayma Rachel l'syamin. Lachein, he writes in the Masechet, shahayu Ruven v'Shimon v'Levi achim, Rachel v'Leah achios, nasa Ruven is Rachel, Shimon nasa is Leah, meis Ruven, nafla Rachel v'Levi, asa b'mayma, achakaf meis Shimon v'lo banim V'nafla af Leah l'fnei Levi. Zikas Leah. Just one second. Now I lost it. Zikas Leah. Wait a minute. Oh, sorry, I got confused. I didn't understand what he meant by Hoysa Nesua Shimon, right? So Shimon died. Leah now falls for even to Levi because of the Zika. V'hinech Sheves Kitsaras Rachel Machmas Zika Zu. I'm not sure exactly what that means. It's like a tzara. It's not exactly a tzara. I mean, tzara is when you have two women who are married to the same man. That's not true. But anyway, oh, because the Zika, right? The Zika itself is like Ishus. So it's like Leah and Rachel are now tsaros. But Einama Keves al Rachel Balas HaMaimer L'Syavim L'Levi Ayom Mishum ShaMaimer Kona Es Rachel Ayifama V'Leah Achosa Nechsheves Kachos Ishto Shel Levi. So again, Leah goes out scot-free, and Rachel can now she can now lend herself to Yibum. Why? Because the Maimer was Kona Rachel. But wait a second. Beit Shammai agrees. Rebbe Loza says that Yibum, that a Maimer is not Kona, right? Because she still needs a chalitza, right? Get is not going to be sufficient. So obviously, Maimer is not a full-fledged Yibum, but it's enough of a gesture. We have to figure out why to protect the status of Rachel from being achos kukasa when Leah falls behind. Exactly how that works, I do not know. Just see if he says anything here. All right, we're going to have to end. Just see. Maybe you have a footnote here. I'm trying to send the lumdus here. You know, you can't tell me that according to Beit Shammai, Maimer is full-fledged Ishus like Yibum, because she'll need both get and chalitza. But somehow, Maimer accomplishes a goal, a major goal, that you would have said that with the falling of Leah for Yibum, now Rachel becomes achos kukasa, and therefore there's no option of Yibum. But no, we're saying that there is an option of Yibum. Why? Because of Maimer. How does that work? Yeah, what does he say?
Actually, shall we ask you a question? In ein hamamar konen lo habia madua yofer kol chol yesh shepir lo kol hamamar ukol em kadesh machos nachos nofeles ufanov akeres liyam eno tzarach lahotzi es a rustosa kol adopet upot there in the host. Hello, Shane. I'm Mamar Mafkia, Zikas Hayibro, the place you could don't
I don't have it. I heard every word you said.
Yeah.
And I don't get the punchline.
You know, it's there, but it's not
Right.
complete.
Right.
It's there. And he's bothered by the same thing.
Right. Oscar doesn't say anything. This sounds like right off his alley.
The Mamar marriage renders Yevamot's bona fide wife of the Yavam. Regard that relatives are biblically forbidden. Your sister is now an heir in the category of wife's sister. When she falls to the second brother, she is released without even releasing.
Right. But no, he's answering half the question, which we had an answer to on our own, namely, why is it that Leah doesn't require neither chalitza or yibum? The answer is because she's achos ishto, because Beit Shammai recognized the Maimer. But we're trying to figure out why he's permitted, according to Beit Shammai, to word am I using to complete, or I'm looking for a word to consummate the marriage to Rachel, meaning Levi to Rachel, when with the nefila of Leah, Rachel becomes a chos kukasa. So how do we do away with a chos kukasa? That's the question. All right, we'll have to stop here today.
He also points out that Russian was this
Agree.
that
Yeah.
we're close to so
Oh, okay. So maybe that'll help us. All right then. So we'll stop here.